Hi esteemed logicians. Welcome to the Logical Christ channel. In this video, we will examine the mathematical miracles in the Quran. We will explore 3 categories of mathematical miracles in the Quran and conduct logical examinations of these mathematical claims. Sit back and relax. We will be back after this short intro.
For us Muslims, we don't use our logic.
The thesis. The concept of mathematical miracles in the Quran, distinct from scientific miracle claims, posits a divinely ordained numerical structure underpinning the text. Muslims categorize these phenomena into 3 main areas: precise word frequencies, intricate numerical patterns often related to the number 19, and unique structural relationships within specific surahs or verses. For Muslims, these perceived mathematical miracles hold significant importance, often presented as undeniable evidence for the Quran's authenticity and divine authorship. Here's Dr. Shaber Ali on the significance of such numeric miracles.
And this is what we do find, that for singular entries like this, you find that there is an amazing correspondence. There is a correspondence between the entries for Satan, which is given as shaitan in Arabic, and for angels, which is malaika. So it's 88 mentions of shaitan, of Satan, and 88 mentions of malaika. This life and the life hereafter are in contrast. As we say, work for this life, but don't lose sight of the hereafter. And this is the subject material of sermons on Fridays. It turns out that the word for this life, dunya, is mentioned in the Quran 115 times, and the word for the life hereafter, akhirah, is mentioned also 115 times. So to think that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was keeping all these numbers in his mind and making sure that these contrasting words come out like this is too remote. And the most likely explanation for this is that it is God who is behind the Quran and controlling and supervising the entire revelation and even the process of compilation to make sure that the book that we will have in our hands today would have this amazing phenomenon about.
The assertion. The purported mathematical miracles in the Quran face significant scholarly challenges. Claims of precise word frequencies often rely on selective counting, manipulating data to fit desired numerical outcomes. This method inherently lacks objectivity and academic rigor, undermining any statistical validity. Such cherry-picking within a large text inevitably yields numerous coincidental numerical patterns. These miracles are not explicitly highlighted in the Quran itself, suggesting a modern, retrospective imposition of significance rather than inherent divine design. More complex systems, like those based on the number 19, use unconventional verse numbering or disregard textual traditions. These subjective methods introduce inconsistencies, invalidating their foundational premises and making independent verification problematic. Conflating numerical patterns with divine authorship risks reducing the Quran's profound message to a mere puzzle. When these patterns prove unreliable, it can inadvertently weaken, rather than strengthen, its perceived authenticity and distract from its true spiritual purpose. Here's a sheikh who insisted that these so-called numerical miracles of the Quran is bogus and not true.
Is there numerical miracles? People usually tend to find it difficult to distinguish between what are subtleties and miracles. Any person who compiles or writes a book can insert in that book a certain number of things and then claim afterwards that this is miraculous, which is not. This is not the type of miracles that the Quran contains, first of all. Second of all, people have gone so deep in this that they started making up things according to their whims and desires. So they started to say, for example, that the word day in the Quran is 365 times, which is the days of the year. And they say that the month in the Quran is only mentioned 12 times, which is 12 times in it. And all of this is bogus, is not true.
The argumentation. The following are three categories of commonly cited mathematical miracle claims. 1. Claims related to word frequencies and pairs. The word day is claimed to appear exactly 365 times in the Quran, same number of days in a solar year. The word month is claimed to appear exactly 12 times, same number of months in a year. The percentages of the words sea and land corresponded to the approximate proportion of sea and land on earth. The words life and death, man and woman, angels and devils, good deeds and wrongdoings, benefit and corruption, world and hereafter, guidance and mercy, and love and obedience are claimed to appear an equal number of times in the Quran. Additionally, the frequency of mentions of animals and names of the prophets are claimed to be numerically balanced. Claims of word frequency miracles often rely on selective counting and interpretive flexibility. For instance, achieving a specific count for day or month necessitates ignoring plural forms, derivatives, or specific grammatical constructions, which can be inconsistent across different word pairs. Furthermore, such patterns are common in large texts. With enough words and counting rules, statistical coincidence can generate seemingly significant numerical relationships, undermining claims of divine design over human pattern seeking. 2. Claims related to the number 19. This is a highly elaborate and controversial system, with many individual claims. The core idea is that the entire Quran is structured around the number 19. Key claims include: the Basmala opening consists of 19 Arabic letters. The total number of chapters is a factor of 19 by 6. The total number of verses is 6,346, which is 19 times 334, and 6 plus 3 plus 4 plus 6. The first revelation and the last revelation are claimed to consist of 19 words. The number of times Allah is mentioned is claimed to be 2,698, which is 19 times 142. Firstly, the methodology of the miracle of 19 is often appears ad hoc and selective. Proponents frequently adjust counting rules to achieve the desired numerical outcomes. Secondly, variations exist in historical Quranic manuscripts and verse numbering systems, which can alter the numerical counts, undermining the consistency required for such a precise code. Finally, in any sufficiently large text like the Quran, one can find numerous coincidental numerical patterns. 3. Claims related to structural and calendaric patterns. The claims of the middle nation verse as the exact middle verse of the chapter. The claim regarding the sleepers of the cave and the number of years of their sleep is an alignment between solar and lunar years. The claim about the number of verses up to the mention of iron correlating with the depth of the Earth's core. The claim about the number of mentions of Noah forming a ring composition. Claims related to the numbering concerning the ants and bees. Claims of structural and calendrical patterns in the Quran, like the middle verse or the sleepers of the cave calculation, often rely on selective interpretation and post hoc analysis. These claims, while interesting, might be coincidental given the vast number of numerical possibilities in a long text. Arguably as coincidences or clever wordplay, not divine mathematical proofs, and divert focus from the Quran's primary spiritual message. Here's Dr. Yasser Qadi on why this concept of mathematical miracles in the Quran is considered a fabrication.
Around 30 years ago, around 30 or so years ago, somebody by the name of Rashad Khalifa here in America, in Arizona, he began propagating a very bizarre theory called the 19 theory of the Quran, the miracle of the 19. And unfortunately, our esteemed Sheikh and teacher, somebody we all love and admire, Sheikh Ahmed Didat, for a while he picked this up, and for a few years he was also propagating this theory until Sheikh Ahmed Didat realized that this person is a very, very dangerous, evil liar and fabricator. And so Sheikh Ahmed Didat rejected this and recanted from this theory of 19. But Rashad Khalifa continued to propagate this theory that there is something of a miraculous 19 repetition of the Quran, and he released a number of books that this word occurs a multiple of 19 times, this letter occurs a multiple of 19 times. Turns out that pretty much all of it was fabricated. Like, who's going to actually sit and count the number of letters or words? So he's fabricating.
The conclusion: the assertion of mathematical miracles in the Quran, while deeply significant for many Muslims as evidence of divine authorship, faces substantial scholarly scrutiny. The methodology of these claims frequently employs subjective criteria or deviates from established textual traditions, compromising their academic rigor and independent verifiability. Ultimately, this attempt to boost the Quran's credibility fails and provides an insight into its man-made authorship. And here's Chris at Speaker's Corner discussed about such mathematical miracles in the Quran.
The first thing we have to understand is the coincidences that are found from a numerical point of view in the Quran. For example, a certain verse, the amount of words that are said, the amount of letters, you can add these up and you end up with a certain outcome, are dependent upon one thing, and that thing is something that we all take for granted. I want us to take a special note of this particular part of the video, because I think it illustrates a few things all at once. So in the chapter of Al-Sajda, the chapter of prostration, you can find in verse 15 a verse that has exactly 15 words, which isn't in and of itself particularly amazing, but they go on. That the 186th word in Al-Sajda is the word prostration, and that if you take the individual digits of 186 and you add them all together, which is very arbitrary in and of itself, but let's go with it, you end up with 15. When you take that number 15, you then multiply it by 2. Don't ask questions. And then from that you get 30, and then from that, which just so happens to be the total amount of verses in the chapter. But there's a big glaring fault here. Everything he's said so far, the adding the numbers up, the multiplication, finding out these numbers all align, is based on one thing. Let's look at the fact that this is arbitrary. There is no reason why you should add these numbers together. What is the logic behind that? Is it consistent? No, they don't. People don't always add up these numbers to get these mathematical miracles. Sometimes they divide, as we'll see in this video. Sometimes they multiply, as we'll see in this video. It's whatever is convenient to get the number that they want to make these meanings synergize and look as if it was intended. But after adding 1, 8, and 6 and coming with 15 and saying, look, 15 is the same verse number that this appears in, he then says that you can multiply this by 2 to get 30, which is the same amount of total verses in the chapter. Well, again, why did you multiply by 2? Why did you do that? Simple answer is because otherwise it wouldn't work. These are arbitrary mathematical expressions to get the intended result. This isn't sincere, it's just figuring out what is needed to get the desired effect. If that means add some, take away some, multiply or divide, then so be it. We'll just pick whatever we need to get the result. But it gets even worse. What happens if we actually don't agree on how many verses there are in this chapter to begin with? Many Muslims don't know this, but the Bismillah, which is recited at the beginning of every single surah or chapter in the Quran, isn't necessarily considered as the first verse. In fact, there's only one surah where Bismillah is legitimately considered to be the very first verse or ayah, and that would be Surah Al-Fatiha, the very first surah. And this is why there is disagreement among Muslims about exactly what the verse numbering should be in the Quran. For example, the Ahmadiyya, as I was having a lovely chat with an Ahmadiyya friend called Khalid at Speaker's Corner, will tell you.
Chapter 43, verse 84, and I call it Sunni numbering, right, because the Sunnis don't count the first verse of the Holy Quran. Yeah, right. Which is really weird, because they're actually insulting the Holy Quran by saying that there are extra verses of the Holy Quran that are not going to be there. And the Quran says it is perfect, so it wouldn't have extra verses lying around, you know? Sure.
This is the benefit of going to Speaker's Corner and having some actual in-person dialogue with people of different faiths. You get to learn this stuff. So Khalid made the point that my Quran differed from his Quran in terms of the numbering, because he included as Ahmadiyya the Bismillah as the very first ayah of that chapter. However, other Muslims don't. So if there's disagreement about the numbering of the Quran, then how can we say with confidence that this is actually the correct way of knowing what verse it is? For example, in this mathematical miracle this smile to Jenna gave, he said it's the 186th word. What if it's actually the 187th word? That would mean that it adds up to 16, not 15. If it adds up to 16, then timesing it by 2 will give you 32, which is not the total number of verses in the chapter. In fact, historically, these kind of issues weren't resolved until the 1924 Cairo edition of the Quran, where because of issues of different variants and different readings and different numbering systems, they decided to standardize this through a single version that was published in Cairo in Egypt. If the Quran that we use today, the numbering system, only really existed as a majorly accepted version in 1924, that means that the Quran miracles are dependent on 1924's Egyptian Cairo edition. You want to say that, that's fine, but I think that at this point you're just being arbitrary and picking what you want to see. This isn't how we do analysis. This isn't how we come to these conclusions. We're just looking for the answers we already know we want to see. Let's keep watching and see what he says next.
Coincidence? Not convinced? There are 43 chapters after this chapter that do not mention Noah, and there are 43 chapters that come before that do not mention Noah either. How many do mention Noah? Well, it's 28, the number of verses in this chapter.
Were you blown away by that? Was that something that you think was genuinely a good example of a mathematical miracle? Let me explain why it isn't. We know from legitimate, authentic Islamic history, whether from Ibn Ishaq or Al-Tabari, we know that the third caliph, Uthman, had burnt manuscripts that didn't conform to his standardized copy and instead standardized the Quran according to the Qurayshi dialect, and he also took the opportunity to arrange the order of the surahs. He took the opportunity to say which was the first Al-Fatiha and which was the last. He is responsible for both the surah and potentially the ayah ordering of the Quran. If that's the case, then in order for this to be a divine miracle, we have to say that Uthman played a particular role in that divine miracle.
I hope you learned from this video. Comment down below for your thoughts on this logical examination on the mathematical miracles in the Quran. Until next time.
Thinking with Logical Christ.